Welcome
Welcome
everyone.
everyone.
Today we have another new episode, and this episode actually we will discuss about clean water and sanitations. And clean water is very essential for Asia Pacific. Already different corporations and universities, they are working to solve these things, and we have our expert from around the world. We have Madam Durga Das and her team from Arrow, and they are doing fantastic work in India. We have our expert Professor Donalds, Mr. Davids, and Professor Paul. So let's start, and we want to discuss, because water is very important. Even in the COVID-19 situation, Malaysia also faced a lot of challenges to solving the water related things. So hopefully we will find out the way. So I want to start from Madam Durga Das. So we want to know more about your project, especially Arrow, and how you solving water problem in India, and yes, what's the global perspective we have?
I'll start off a little bit about talking about the company, and then maybe at the next round of getting into the technical details, I will have my co-founder and partner, Dr. Kumar, speak a little specifically more to the solutions themselves. I've been interested in water for about 14 years, and Kumar's been experimenting in water as well for the last 10 years. And while he works on at a very technical, scientific level on how to manage water, how to make water change behavior, my interest has come mostly from the point of social impact and how to create change. And we came together a couple of years ago to form Aero. We are what we call a for-profit social enterprise, and what I mean by that is we're here, of course, to make some money so we can sustain ourselves. But we're also very committed to creating a social impact, making a change in people's lives. We're a holistic water management solutions company, and what I mean by that is while we have patented solutions for delivering water from air to atmospheric moisture, we also have a solution where we can take waste RO water and deliver back potable water. We have a solution that treats any wastewater, TDS of 20,000 plus, no problem, heavy metals, even sewage, and we can deliver back clean drinking water. And whilst these are our patents and our solutions, we are not adverse to recommending rainwater harvesting solutions. We continually encourage people to use rainy filters and aerators to measure the flow of or balance the flow of water in their homes and offices. And so we're basically creating awareness, making sure people understand the importance of conserving water, judicious water management, and then of course, treating water through other solutions that we have. We've found a lot of success in the last year and a half in spite of COVID. And I would say sometimes because of COVID as well, it's become a very important factor that people have realized that we need to make a difference. And now we're working with a lot of CSR budgets of large corporations to implement this in government public schools, in communities and villages. And of course, people are buying products that we have off the shelf because they are small in size and can just be plug and play, delivering 5 to 10 liters of water to all 500 liters of water just by switching on a button. So that's what we do as a company.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor Donald.
Well, I think that water, 5,000 children a day die about from bad water. So what people are doing to try and clean the water is incredibly important. It's something that it turns out to be an educational thing as well as a technical thing. I've been a member of the Rotary Club for years, and I've never been lucky enough to go on one of the water projects that they do, but they've been going all over the world, creating ways that people can get clean water. For instance, there was a village in China where they got water from a stream that went right through the village, and they would wash their clothes there, and there would be some human waste that would get into the water, and people were sick all the time. And nearby there was a lake, and so they basically built a system that would pump pure water from this lake into the village so that people had pure and clean water. And of course, that improved their health a lot. And I think that it's I know, in fact, I shouldn't say I think, I know that it's a huge burden on the developing world. Children that grow up that are constantly sick with diarrhea from cholera and dysentery and other waterborne diseases don't grow up with as good cognitive facilities. They don't grow as tall. They're just not as healthy. And so having people you need everybody to contribute. So if people are sick a lot and they can't contribute and they don't develop to their full capacity, it's a drag on the system. People just don't. It makes it harder for them to basically engage with people who don't have those handicaps. So it makes it hard for them to be part of the global community and many other things. And part of it is that people just don't know that. I mean, it's at a completely different level besides the fact that they have these problems. If they knew, they could be more careful about building latrines and keeping the human waste out of the water. They learn to wash their hands. They learn to boil the water before they drank it. And in many parts of the world, in some parts of the developing world, people just don't understand that that's something that's important to do. So part of our task is, I think, maybe things like this, where we wind up being able to educate people everywhere about the importance of being able to do things like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Professor Paul. Yes.
Yes, I'll talk a little bit about the climate change implications on the potable freshwater supply and sanitation. So most people are aware of the alpine glaciers, for example, in the Himalayas that are losing their snowpack, and these alpine regions, are very important for water storage to feed rivers in the summers. So they collect the water from the snow pack in the winters, and as there's less and less snow, and as we undergo climate change, the temperature in alpine regions is increasing at least double the rate that the global average temperature is increasing. So we're getting snowpack severely reduced, and this is a threat just alone in Asia to over 1 billion people's water supply. So, many major rivers around the world are drying up in the warm seasons, and in fact, they're not reaching the ocean. They run dry before they reach the ocean. So this, of course, is a huge problem if water is being drawn from the rivers. Sea level rise is having a huge impact on coastal regions. You get the salt water inundating fertile land, but it also can seep into aquifers and contaminate water aquifers, affecting people's freshwater supply. One of the things with climate is you get more extreme weather events. So dry areas are getting drier and wet areas are getting wetter, but we also get this weather wilding where, first of all, we're getting more droughts and more floods around the world. And both the droughts are, of course, cutting into the water supply for people. The floods are also very bad because they can carry and spill sewage and contaminate water supply. Also, all of the human, when a city is flooded out, the contaminants and the chemicals, etc., that go into the rivers and ocean are then horrendous, and also into aquifers. But it's weather wilding that's important. That's also very important, and this is where you go from drought in a region to torrential rain leading to flooding back to drought. So the U.S. is a good example. One year there was record rainfall in the Mississippi, hit record levels, and then the next year there was record drought, record low water levels on the Mississippi, and then the following year even more rain and flood. So this, of course, spreads contaminants and gets into aquifers and so on. Australia is an ongoing example right now. It's been in drought for many years, and they're having huge amounts of rainfall. And when you have drought, the soils get very hard, and you can't get much water infiltration in through the surface down into aquifers. So most of the water from torrential rains is runoff, and it causes lots of erosions and runoff of sediments, et cetera, into rivers and contaminates the water supply. So this is a huge issue. Right now we're seeing massive rain and flooding in Australia. So all of these factors from climate change exacerbate the water problem, the problems for clean water and sanitation around the world.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. David.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Well, water, I suppose, is one of the most precious resources we have. Is not only important for our survival, or actually for every species. It's essential for the survival. We need it to survive. Nevertheless, we are hardly struggling with having clean water. And we are also actually going very careless with water around. Yeah, we are spoiling it, we are polluting it, and we are also spreading it around. It's like if you think which industrial process is running without water. None. For every product we are producing, we need water. And in this regard, we are also wasting a lot of water. And actually, is like there is not so much clean drinking water around. Most of the water our planet consists is actually salt water, which a species can't digest. So it's like, first of all, to make it to drinkable water, we have to purify it. Uh, and this is one thing we have to remember. And we are starting now in Israel. You have some domes for underground water. In actually Africa, you have some domes with underground water which are being pumped out. So most of our fresh water resources are actually being pumped out, are being used, are being consumed, and there's not so much drinking water left. The drinking water which is actually left most of the time is being polluted or being wasted. And also, if I think here in Europe about the Mediterranean, I don't have the accurate numbers at the moment, but we've polluted with, I don't know how many tons of sewage, of crude oil, of heavy minerals, as such as mercury, copper, lead, and we are doing this completely unconsciousness. And this is a thing where we have to do and act a lot of. And also here, I mean, in the Western world, we are on the chocolate side of the world. Water is coming out of our into the house. But like, if you think about Africa, Asia, also South America, it is a way to get water. In Africa, human beings have to spend, I don't know, half of their day to get fresh water for their daily needs. And this is also which we have to consider highly.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Adrian.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, yes, go ahead.
Yes, you continue, please. No problem.
Yeah, I came a bit late. So what is the question? Sorry.
Yeah, basically, we are discussing
Can't hear.
He probably has a poor internet connection. The question was, Adrian, we were talking about sanitation and our views on the same subject.
Sorry. Yes. Yes. Like, can you just define the topic, clean water and sanitations?
Well, I'm currently in Australia, and we don't really have a problem with sanitation, but we do have a problem with clean water. And so some of the states like Queensland have extremely high level of rainfall and a lot of water. And some states like South Australia, where I'm in, is one of the driest places in the world. Unlike America, where they have big dams like the Hoover Dam of the Colorado River, and that supplies, Nevada, Las Vegas. But Australia doesn't do that, and so most of the water that comes into Queensland, a huge amount of water, basically just goes straight into the ocean. And various politicians have tried to say we should dam the water and send it to the drier parts of Australia. But in today's age, the environmentalists are very strong, and they very much against damming water. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but there's a good argument on both sides. And so Australia actually has a lot of rainfall in some parts, but it basically just flows straight in the ocean, and other parts are totally dry, and they have drought and not enough water. So some people, some politicians want to dam that water, but the environmentalists have a very powerful in Australia, so they're not damming that water. So so we have this issue, and I think it's in a lot of parts of the world. You have a lot of water in some parts of the world, and not much water in other parts. So what can we do about that? Do we follow the environmental policies where they're very anti creating dams currently, or do we put dams and spread the water to dry parts of the countries? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. William.
Good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you're at. Complicated topic. To begin with, worldwide, the issues that were just raised about damming current waters, we see that China has been employing that policy for a decade now, and that's causing fights nationally, nation to nation, because of the water supply. It's an echo of what's going on in the United States, out in the western United States, where the Colorado River travels all the way down through a number of different states, and between California and Arizona and Las Vegas and Nevada and stuff. It's a challenging issue. On the one hand, you do in fact have the arguments from the environmentalists, which say that previous experiences with dams do disrupt the natural flow of water and therefore irrigation. Just the other side of it is that when we raise this question, it becomes an issue of essentially attempts at terraforming. So in Australia, for example, as our colleague just cited, there are parts that are drier and there are parts that are wetter. And if you dam and then redirect the water, are we in fact terraforming? That becomes more of an immediate issue when we start to consider the impact on farming in those things. And then, of course, you've got to think about the issues when it comes to having to feed what is expected by 2050, at least estimates, to be a population around the world of 9.5 billion. So we need to increase our food production in order to service that kind of people. And of course, we need water. And of course, as nations go after the water, which is a vital issue. I mean, even in the conflict between Israel and Palestine, there's an issue of water distribution, one side having more than the other side. So just as my initial thoughts, it's complicated. It really is. I did just want to make this other one comment, just because my understanding of today's subject is not only just water, but it's also water sanitation. And then when you get back around to me, I did have one other item, but I defer back to Dr. Sharif.
Thank you. I just want to share a few of the facts about water and sanitations. There are 10 different facts for year 2021, but just few fact I just want to take for today's discussion. Number one, 784 million people around the world are without basic water access. That more than like twice the populations of United States. Number two, more people die from unsafe water than from all form of violence, including war. 2 billion people, or about 1 in 4, lack access to a toilet or latrine. So I just want to take these 3 points. So then I directly want to go to Madam Durgadas. So as your company practically solving the water related things, what is the practical scenario in India, or do you have access in other country, you are solving other countries problem? What's the real scenario and what's going on inside the, like, yes.
Yeah. The real scenario in India would be, as everybody said, the 80% of water consumption goes to the industries who manufacture clothing, who deal with leather and other essential items. The 20% goes to the agriculture, even the less than 5% goes to the drinking water supply. But the 80% of the water is not properly recycled or refurbished or reclaimed. So that's where Aeronero stepped in, and we started giving solutions to all those industries. And we are giving two main solutions. One is called mist. Whatever the RO waste which comes out of the unit, we reclaim it and we give it back to them without using a regular traditional way of using membrane or any other evaporation technique. We use a completely different method to recoup the RO waste. And the other area where we step in is the dyeing industry. Whatever comes out of the clothing industry, the soapy water or the high amount of BOD and COD, we reduce them and then we give the right pH water back into the industry. So that we call it as reclaim. So these two major solutions have been served across the country. We have given a lot of solutions to food industry, dyeing industry, also to electroplating industries. And especially in electroplating industry, we get heavy metals. Say example, potassium cyanide is highly effluent to the groundwater, which goes directly and mixes with the drainage system. We stopped it and we give this solution to many of the industry which is present in South India. And of course, we also address the drinking water issues by giving our atmospheric water generator missions. So where there is no water in the ground, where there is a saline water, we try to give our atmospheric water generator to a different part of India.
I'll just add one point to what Dr. Kumar said, and that's to address the question that you also brought up about, and what Donald spoke about much earlier in the conversation, the fact of people defecating outside because they don't use the latrine, right, to go to the bathroom. And this creates a huge amount of, unhygienic conditions, and sanitation is nowhere close. To understand this problem, one has to understand this doesn't come from the fact that we don't have bathrooms, we don't have latrines built. In fact, Donald, I'm with the Rotary Club here as well, and our district has done. We put hundreds of toilets free of cost, so people have access to toilets. The other problem is toilets in schools. Girl children don't go to school because their bathrooms are so messy and dirty, and it's just unhygienic. Now, the problem with the toilet is not that we don't have the toilets, we don't have the water in the toilet. And that is the biggest issue. So you build the toilet, you have to provide some water, and then you have no way of providing additional water. When we run out of water, the toilet is the last place to get the water. And this is where Aeronero also has made a difference. We have worked very closely with the Rotary clubs and the District 222 right here in India. When we not only build toilets, we've actually given them a treatment system which takes the sewage water, treats it, and sends it right back to the bathroom for flushing. So now there's always water in the toilet. And this is what will make people use the toilet, stay hygienic, stay clean, and send girl children back to school.
Mhm. Thank you, ma'am. Professor Donalds, like even we have other speakers as well. They are practically solving problem inside India. India is one of the largest populated country, and they have this water related challenge. Madam Durga with her team, she is solving, as well as sanitation's also biggest problem. Even Bill and Melinda Gates foundations, even Asian Development Bank, they are also contributing and solving these sanitations and water related things. But beside that, what do you think the developing nations, different corporations and different investment companies, how they can contribute for this industry? What your observation, or how different entrepreneur can come and solve this problem? I think that this is actually one of the largest problem right now. Yes. Unmute, please. Unmute, Professor.
I am. I
Okay,
got it.
thank you.
Interesting that Bangladesh has actually been more successful at getting people to use latrines. There are pit latrines, which are gross, but they're better than nothing. But as the efforts that to bring water and actually are huge and super important. I mean, if I know Bill and Melinda Gates and all of and any corporation, the main thing that they really need to do is to find ways of not having the human waste go into the water that they drink, because that is going to make people sick every time. It's just not good. The yeah I want to mention one thing. In California, we're exactly the example that people gave. It rains like crazy in Northern California, and the farther south you get, the less rain that we have. One thing that's critical, though, is that California provides half the fruits and vegetables to the entire country. And we, in order to do that, we need water. And a lot of the water has been coming from a giant aquifer that lives under the California Central Valley. And when we talk about ways of like desalination and things like that, I think that people don't comprehend the scale. The California Central Valley is about 800 miles long and 300 miles wide. It takes maybe 7 or 8 hours to drive from the top to the bottom, or more. Actually, it would be more like all the way from the top to the bottom would probably take 12 to 14 hours. It's huge. And so the amount of water that it takes to be able to irrigate something like that is, it's incomprehensible. It's not something that we're going to be able to do with desalination plants. In California, we use, if you look at 100% of our water, we use 50% of it to keep the rivers there. So we release the water into the ocean we count on wetlands where all around the coast of California, there's these mud flats that are a combination of fresh and salt water. And they're the breeding grounds for hundreds and hundreds of species of birds and all kinds of animals and creatures. And as sea level rises, they also protect us from storm surges and various kinds of damage that can come from the changing climate. So we have to have those. And then we use 40% for agriculture and only 10% for human drinking water. So, and interestingly enough, all the agriculture is only 2% of California's gross domestic product. So it actually doesn't contribute a lot financially, but it's essential for the food supply of the United States. And so that's an interesting dilemma when you get to the point where it's not financially viable to do that. I mean, it makes more sense to, if you're looking at it purely financially, to give the water to corporations that can use the water to make microchips or something, and which bring a huge amount of money into California. So I think that governments and corporations have to be responsible. And I think we're seeing that to more of a degree because people are boycotting corporations. One that we consider to be evil is Nestle's corporation, because Nestle's corporation got a grant where it's taking out lots of water, not paying for it, but they're also the number one at water conservation. The company is absolutely committed to water conservation. So it's a two-edged sword, and I'm going to say that for now and maybe talk more later. And thank you.
Thank you. Like when you bring the example from Bangladesh, so I just want to give some credit, like NGO like BRAC, like ASHA, Grameen Bank, even ICDDRB, they are also playing a very good role for solving different healthcare related things, especially diarrhea is a big problem. I think ICDDRB also head of HR Musharraf Hossain, he also joined World Talent Economy Forum. So I think Professor Donald's and Professor Musharraf. So anyway, so I think not only governments, we need to take more initiative to solve this kind of problems. So anyway, Mr. David, yes.
Okay. Well, about the question, I'm sorry, but basically is, I mean, a big solution for drinking water, which we have, or the biggest source consuming drinking water, is actually animal farming. And also in terms of land use. Animal farming is using most of the land and water in the agricultural field. 75% of the usage area. And if we shrink this down to a certain extent, I think we won't have so many water issues anymore, as well as land degradation problems. So this is a big major point which we need to do, because also in terms which was said before, land is getting drier, land is getting wetter. Yeah, in certain extent, yes, but human beings or our way of living created this issue and is accelerating this issue very much. And to stop this point, I think is we have to stop to a certain extent how we are living, how we are farming, how we are producing.
Thank you, Professor Paul.
Yes. So for every 1 degree Celsius rise in global average temperature, there's 7% more water vapor in the atmosphere, and about half of that increases the intensity of the rainfall. But the global precipitation, the average global precipitation is not changing that much. So what that means is that the distribution of the water is what is changing. So it's like a boom bust in terms of rainfall. If you're in dry areas, they're getting much drier. If you're in wet areas, they're getting much wetter. But there's also cases where there's torrential rainfalls in dry areas, and the rain comes down, the water comes down so quickly that it doesn't have time to infiltrate and replenish the aquifers. It's just overland. It runs over land, and rivers swell, and it ends up in the oceans quickly. Now, in terms of we can't really talk about water without talking about food, because food is really embodied water, right? A large percentage of food is made up of water. So, when we're eating that food, we're also getting the water intake. And a very recent paper just came out in the last within the last month that talked about the C3 plants versus C4 plants. C3 plants most plants are called C3 plants, and they don't retain water that well. The C4 plants are like the grasses and corn and they retain water a little bit better. But the point is that their response to temperature increase is very, very different. So when we get increasing temperature, the photosynthesis that is done by a plant, that increases in a curve, reaches a maximum and then decreases. The C4 plants increase, the maximum is later, okay, at a higher temperature. But respiration, okay, at night plants undergo respiration where they're putting carbon into the atmosphere, and that increases, that peaks at a much higher temperature. So the problem is that we're reaching a threshold for terrestrial plants. We've already passed the maximum of photosynthesis for C3 plants. So further temperature rises are going to be, that are accelerating, are going to accelerate the decrease of photosynthesis for plants on land. So to give you an idea, the land right now is about a 30% carbon sink. So 30% of global emissions are removed from the atmosphere by land plants. Okay, that's sink. But because of this temperature stress on plants on land, that number will be cut in half roughly by 2040. That's only 20 years away. So instead of 30% of the carbon we emit being absorbed by land plants, that will be reduced to 15%. So that difference is going to end up in the atmosphere, greatly accelerating climate change. So we're, if you talk about the land sink reducing by half, then that's, the plants are photosynthesizing and growing by half. If they're only absorbing half the amount of carbon, there's only half the biomass there. And so, that tells me that yields of crops is going to, be greatly reduced, maybe as high as 50% for unirrigated growth of crop growth. And it's not just the plants, it's the trees and everything else. So that means that they'll be absorbing a lot less water, of course. And when it gets warmer, the plants, there's actually physical changes in the leaves of plants, the size of the stomata, etc. So the net result is that I think this is a huge threshold problem. Okay, not only is the land is the terrestrial vegetation going to become less and less of a sink, but essentially the land will when the sink capability of the carbon is less than the respiration part from the plants, and plants will become a net emitter of carbon. Okay, so we're facing this within a few decades. That's what the best science is showing. So that of course the change of plant growth on the surface of the earth has a huge impact on the water, where the water is, how much water is being absorbed, right? And one thing that will happen is that as plants become less and less efficient at absorbing water and undergoing photosynthesis, and there'll be more water left on the land surfaces for other things, which is not such a bad thing for people wanting drinking water, but in terms of wanting to eat, it's a horrendous thing. So we need to try to keep a perspective on climate as to what are the worst threats that we face. And I say this plant thing is one of the worst threats, and people don't recognize it yet.
Thank you. We have our new friend, Mr. Brian. So I think this is your first sessions with World Talent Economy Forums. Can you please introduce yourself with our speakers and audience, and how do you want to define, because we are discussing about clean water and sanitation issues today. Yes.
Sure. Great. Thank you for the opportunity. I live off the grid. I live only on rainwater. And so I've made very personal decisions where I live about every detail of how I use water. So I'm less focused on talking about the problems and more focused on what I can do as an individual and then what we can do as communities. So that's what I'm going to talk about. My project in brief is I live on 83 acres in central Mexico off the grid. I've been here since 2004. It's been a big, huge adventure. And I like talking about water issues a lot. And so let's do that. I've got about 110,000 liters of storage that I use, and I drink that water unfiltered. I do actually provide for any visitors here. I provide them filtered water, but I think I've been fine, and I did test my water once. So number one thing I would suggest is if the entire civilization was living off rainwater, that would solve a lot of problems. Of course, that's impossible given our current situation. You know, we have unclean air, we have very high population densities, we have roofing that is not designed to capture water, but every roof should be capturing water. And then you can actually calculate, there's a formula for calculating how much water you can get off of a roof with your rain cycle, your annual average rain cycle. That's really important. Now, if it rains all the time, you don't need to store very much water, but if, like where I live, there's a brief rainy season, then you need to store enough water to survive the rest of the year. So you can calculate exactly what your personal water needs are. Now, I'm just talking about home level stuff individuals can do. I realize there's bigger problems, so we can talk about corporations and them stealing water and all this stuff. I'm not going to address that right now. My solution, go like this. Store the water and then learn how to use way less water. Essentially, we are water wasting pigs. It's no surprise we have a water crisis, and the easiest solution isn't some new gadget or some new technology. The easiest solution is conservation, learning to use less. And the thing is that the people in the Western industrial worlds or wealthy people have access to all this water, so they use it. It's easy for them. It's cheap for them. Of course, they're going to waste it. So we need to learn from the people who live with less water and then figure out how much water do we actually need in order to be healthy, to have drinking water, some cooking, we wash clothing. There's two big areas I see that we can fix our water consumption at the home level. Here we go. Number one is composting toilets. Okay. I have not shit in clean water for many years now. And every time that you are shitting in clean water, you should remind yourself that you're totally contaminating a useful resource. And your society is actually making you do it. It's actually illegal to build composting toilets in much of the United States. I don't live in the United States because I want to live in a free country where I can be independent of centralized systems. It is ridiculous that you are required by law to shit in clean water. And all over the world, people should address that with their governments or municipalities. Whatever. Sorry. So the composting toilets I have aren't these expensive plastic ones with fans that you buy. You could spend $10,000 on a composting toilet. Do not do that. You could use a 5-gallon bucket system if you wanted to, and you can see lots of YouTube videos on those. I actually have one of those now, and I've been using it because I'm briefly disabled, but I have big, larger composting toilets that require no maintenance. There's no moving parts. And so it can be built all with local materials. Any fancy thing that you have to go somewhere else to get parts for, or, you know, and governments and nonprofits even push these bad solutions that end up failing. We want simple things built with local materials that are perfectly hygienic, and it's so easy, it's ridiculous. I've been doing it for 15 years, 16 years or so. Now I'm going to bring up another issue real quick. Am I going too long here?
You can, yeah, you can
okay.
continue.
Okay. If I get too talkative, you just let me know. I can talk for hours. A thing that goes along with the composting toilet, and I'll talk less about it, is the pee garden. When you're flushing the toilet, you're often flushing it for pee, not poo. And I want to separate these systems mostly. I want people to be able to pee in something And then that pee is very easy to deal with. It's much easier to deal with than solid waste, right? So I'll stop on composting toilets now, but that gets rid of how much of the water you waste. So there's some estimates that it's like 40% of your water is just being flushed down the toilet. 40%. That's an enormous gain if we just make a very simple change. Number 2 on saving water is shower water. And this is a cultural thing. People take showers. Some people take a shower every day. I think I'm going on about a month without a shower. Now, I wouldn't suggest that because that's gross. But what we do here in the culture, in this kind of cultural laboratory called Bosque Village, that's where I live. You can put a link to it somewhere, look it up. You can look up my name too, you'll find it all. If people sit in a sauna for 20 to 40 minutes, then all their dead skin, you feel your skin roll off, and you really get clean, like way cleaner than just dumping some water on you in a shower. And it becomes really easy to scrub that all off. And so you're 5 times cleaner than if you took a water shower. You had maybe a social time, or maybe you had a quiet time in your sauna. It's your sauna. You can use it how you like. So then you rinse off real quick with a little bit of water, and you've just gotten rid of about 90 to 95% of your shower water usage. And showers use a lot of water. So these are simple cultural solutions that we can immediately implement. We can decide as the industrial countries, the 10% of the people that use 50% of the resources, we can decide that we're part of the problem and we're going to be part of the solution, and we're going to come up with elegant, simple solutions for saving massive amounts of water. I have a bunch of other ideas about how to save water, ideas about solar distillation of water so we can turn seawater into fresh water, but I think that's a pretty good introduction, I guess.
Thank you. Dr. William.
Oh, well, not to switch up here, but Brian, normally when we talk about the discussion of desalination plants,
sure,
with seawater and such, I'm kind of familiar. What I don't know, one of the reasons why I love this program is that I get to learn. So you just said to take seawater using solar and turn it into potable water. That's my question. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you whatever Dr. Sharif was going to give me. Can you answer that question for me, please?
How I would do purification of seawater with solar?
Yeah.
I'll tell you exactly how. And I've never heard this idea before. And I hope anyone that has more engineering skills than me or cares about it, I don't live next to the ocean, I hope they steal this idea. Please steal this idea. You have now what's called evacuated tube solar hot water heaters. If you don't know what that is, it's a black tube in a vacuum that fills with water. It heats the water. It all gets stored in a big thermos. It is an amazing system. They're spreading like crazy here in Mexico because people have less centralized infrastructure and energy in general. They work without any motors. So you don't need any motors, no moving parts. Moving parts break all the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these evacuated tube solar hot water heaters, which will actually boil water. We hook that up with coils of copper to mixed in with the thing with the seawater in it. So we're heating the seawater.
Okay.
Now these heaters are so hot that they actually will boil water.
Right.
Well, how you still water? You boil it. You boil the water, and the water goes up, and then you collect it, and it just sits there coming out, just like you would with alcohol, right?
Okay. No, right. But how do you get the salt out of the seawater?
The salt will remain behind in the container of the original water, and then you can occasionally dump it out. And I do realize that if you were to do that at a large scale, you have to figure out what to do with that salt.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it's a waste product at that point that could potentially contaminate the ground. But this is a very,
So you're essentially saying, what they've been doing here in the United States, particularly during Prohibition, just set up a still.
Essentially, it's a solar still. The nice thing is it doesn't use any electricity or fire, and so it's easy to use. It would just keep operating all day long, and it would even operate a little bit at night because there's still hot water in the thermos, right?
Okay.
And so,
nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Dr. Sharif, I hand it back over to you. I just learned more than anything.
Thank you. Professor Adrian, yes, you are from academia, so what type of research actually happening in these industries or you want to share something, because we have many youth, they want to know about these things. Professor Adrian, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry. Well, from engineering point of view, I think a lot of engineering projects are looking at the techniques for making undrinkable water drinkable, or at least for use in industrial uses. And I think someone else said that a lot of water is used for farming, but depending on which country, an incredible amount of water is used actually for industrial purposes, and in fact much more than in a lot of places, much more than average home consumers. So although a lot of focus is on average home consumers, a massive amount of water actually used in industrial processes, and so I think that needs to be looked at. I think the technology for purifying water desalination has come a long way. I think one example is in Singapore, where they basically have extremely little land, and they don't want to depend on Malaysia forever for water for obvious security reasons. So they've made huge technological strides to make water either from the wastewater or desalination. So I think the technology has come a long way. It's still of course much more expensive than traditional water sources, but for countries like Singapore, they can afford it.
Thank you, Professor. Madam Durgadas and your team, as you also providing technology and technological solutions. So if you explain with our speakers, because they're from around the world. So yeah.
So we talked a little bit, I think, during the conversation about precipitation being more or less the same. It hasn't changed very much. Then what is the problem? We are not forming clouds in time. We don't have clouds that generate enough rainfall in time. When we have rainfall, it's at the wrong time, and then we end up with storms, or we end up with completely dry weather. This kind of climate disturbance is, of course, because of a couple of reasons. One is our ozone layer and how we damaged it. And secondly, cutting down a rainforest. We cut down trees indiscriminately. We've created our own problems. So given that this is a problem, and yet precipitation is happening as it always has, what could we do? And that's how we came up with a solution. And Dr. Kumar can explain to you what we did to solve that problem.
Yeah. So
Thank
as
you. Yes.
the precipitation, yeah. So as the precipitation increases, I mean, the amount of water vapor is getting higher and higher. So what we did is we just calculated the amount of water vapor present at any given point of time, which is 13.6 sextillion, that is 10 to the power of 18. So we thought, how do we tap those huge amount of water vapor? So we looked into the nature, and we did our own study, and then we come up with a solution. It's a biomimicking, whatever the desert feature, but in the drastic conditions, like desert beetle or cactus or all this small houseflies. It traps those water and converts into clean drinking water. The same technology we also implemented in our machine, and we started producing water. It's an affordable rate, and we supplied almost 2,500 units in India. And people who live in drastic conditions, they able to tap those water vapor and condense and then convert it to clean drinking water.
So the cost of water for our machine that comes out of our machine is less than 2 cents a liter of water, and it's mineralized water. And this basically happens from the techniques that we've deployed. One of the points that Ryan mentioned about the solution from the pipes and using solar, right, and maybe getting seawater into it. We briefly discussed it because we're working here with IIT Chennai on a solution where we want, while our machines produce water less than 2 cents, the cost of our machines is, let's say, a 20-liter per day machine costs $700. Now, that's still not affordable for the average Indian. It's okay for the Western world, but not for the average Indian. So we wanted to make something that was around $100. So a person can produce 5 to 7 liters of water every day and with very little maintenance. So the technology or the idea we're working on is to use silica to grab the same moisture, but then to apply it to the system that Brian discussed. But when you talk about using seawater, then Dr. Kumar had a point of view which I think he can share.
Yeah. As I said earlier, we reuse the RO waste, whatever which comes out of the RO machine, the reject water, which has a high in TDS. We take that water, we atomize it, and then we form it as a vapor, and it starts to condense and convert into clean drinking water. So in that way, even we tested with 10,000 milligrams per liter, 10,000 ppm TDS water. We tested and we started converting those water into a clean drinking water with a minimal power. So that gives a lot of encouragement from our community, and we started implementing the similar solution. And also we are working on eddy currents, like with the airflow, with the existing water. When you introduce an air into your water, it starts to create a turbulence. So that turbulence creates microparticles inside, and then starts to separate the nanostructure. And that water, we pass it through our multiple stage of filtration, and then we atomize it, and then we give it to our mist system. So that is also we are working on. And the next thing which I wanted to mention is the per capita water. For example, northern hemisphere countries like Canada, which has 6,000 cubic meter per person, and China it will be like 2,500. Even India in 1950, it was not even 1950, 1996, it was 2,500 cubic meter per person, but now it comes down to 1,500 because of all this consumption and the poor rainfall. So now we are trying to recoup it, and then we're trying to create an artificial system where we can draw those moisture which is getting evaporated from our places. So that's how we recoup all the moisture as well as the wastewater from the atmosphere.
Thank you. Professor Donald. Yes, we are discussing about different technology and strategy. Yes.
Well, I'm we're doing more and more desalinization in California. And of course, as it's basically just evaporating water. So things as simple as having giant greenhouses in hot places allow the water to evaporate and run down the glass of the greenhouse, and you can collect water that way with using solar energy. So it's possible to do, but again, I looked it up, and the 10% of water use that's for people, urban, it includes industrial use. So all of the industrial use of water in California is less than 10%. In other words, if you add all for showers and drinking and flushing toilets and making stuff and all of that is 10% of the water use in California. So as I said before, 40% of it is for agricultural use, and the 50% that keeps rivers running and allows the salmon to live and things like that is all mostly in the north of California, where we have tons of rain anyway. So there would be no way to capture the water in any certain, unless we built more dams, which is not going to happen. So I think for human use, I think it's possible to use these technologies, but the scale of water use for something like California's agriculture is incomprehensible. I mean, it is a big valley, and right now we're draining the aquifers. So I think what somebody said about less less beef. The main crop that's grown in the Central Valley is alfalfa, which is used as feedstock. It's not that the cows themselves use so much water, but feeding the cows. And then we also export a lot of alfalfa to China, where they use it for feedstock too. So I think that, doing less of that would be a good idea, but managing what kind of crops you use would save you a lot more water than just any other technology. So that's what I have to say right now. Oh yeah, well no,
Yes,
there's one
thank
other
you.
thing I want to say. Wait, there's one other thing I want to say that's really important. The people talked about how long it takes to get water, and in most of these places, women are assigned to do this job. So it's an incredibly repressive thing for women not to be able to have clean water in most of the areas in the world. So I think people need to be aware of that it's something that not just keeps everyone down, but it keeps women down significantly more than it does anyone else. And I want to point that out. So now I'm finished.
Thank you. Yes. First, Dr. William, then Mr. Brian. Yes.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation, exchanging ideas, and we have solutions out there, and we'll focus on the solutions, because all of these solutions are about to become the hotbed of the discussion, because the Biden administration is putting together a $2 to $3 trillion infrastructure plan. Now, I've often been on this show. I've often said, before the election, I said, wait till America gets back. And then I was like, well, wait and watch what we do. Because with the new administration, things are going to change. And there's nothing like, having an administration that says this is a priority. We're in a rare and unique moment in American history, that is. And for a president now, still within his first 100 days, to be talking about a $2 to $3 trillion infrastructure plan. Now, as part and parcel of infrastructure, most people think about roads and bridges and things of that nature. But water is the exact part of the future of infrastructure. And part of his plan, at least as it's coming together, is that it's focused on the future, green technology, sustainable issues with regard to the future. And that means water. And so I don't know, and I can't tell the audience, Dr. Sharif, what's going to happen. What I can tell you is there are forward-thinking people. And while other people are thinking infrastructure, roads, bridges, and buildings, they're thinking infrastructure. And there are people having this very, very same conversation. And we're going to wait and see. And of course, that always leads to the spin-off effect. Because, for better or worse, whether you like it or you don't, what America does first, other nations start to look at and to see. But, what America does is informed by the very people that are on your show right now. So that was the thing that I began at the beginning of the hour that I wanted to mention, because I know coming down the line is $2 to $3 trillion focused on infrastructure, and water has got to be up at the top. So that's why I was intrigued, Brian, when you started telling me about solar. And Donald, I think you're right. You can set up greenhouses. We can bring in the seawater. It evaporates, because that's just another form of a still, which I think more people can understand. Because I think more people know how to make liquor than they know how to make clean water from seawater. That's my only option.
Thank you.
Right now.
Thank you, Mr. Brian. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, this is a great conversation. You guys are just great. On the infrastructure thing you just mentioned, sir, I think that is the key. And what I would like to see is decentralized infrastructure. And the government always proposes centralized infrastructure that they can control. But I'm a big fan of having remote systems. And of course, that helps very rural people. And a lot of rural people are some of the people who are most resource poor. So I totally agree with you on that. I did want to address the earlier comment by Donald. I understand that what you're saying. And what you're essentially saying is most of the water isn't being wasted at home. Most of it's industry and agriculture. And that's very true. I hope that noting that never becomes the message, don't worry about it at home. Because we have control at home, and we really see the waste that's happening. The other part that happens at home is we buy stuff for our homes and our lives, and that is what industry is. And so our consumption is causing all that industrial stuff. So stopping consuming so much, stop being part of the 10% of the world that uses 50% of the resources, and you've just saved water. On the agricultural end, we can make decisions about what we eat to eat food that wasted less water. Like you mentioned about, the alfalfa and all these things we grow just to feed livestock. Well, I actually decided not to have cows here, even though my neighbors do. What I'm a proponent of is rabbits and chickens. Rabbits and chickens are the best way to produce animal products for human consumption. Even though dairy is very tasty, it's better than dairy, better than beef. And I've raised rabbits before. They can be done at a small scale. You don't have to transport them as far. You get fur out of it. I mean, it's just amazing. And they're cute. Does make them hard to kill. And the chickens, I don't raise those for meat because they're giving me a prepackaged meat product in a perfect package, an egg. And they're giving it to me with very little work, and they eat all of my food waste. There is no food waste. Any compost stuff you've got, I mean, I try to get it from out in town when I go to town and bring it in. So if we change our eating habits, we can change what water is being used to produce it. I think it's, I forget what nut it is in California, but that particular nut, it's like pistachios or something, uses a huge amount of water. So maybe we should go down the list of all the foods we eat and say, I'm going to pick the foods that use less water because that's going to help in this world crisis.
Thank you. Now I want to go to Europe. What you want to bring from Europe, Mr. David? So I think that Europe also has a lot of technology and technological solution.
Well, first of all, from a political perspective, Europe is making water framework directives every 7 years. So this is quite a binding agreement. So it's like a very long-term perspective. In terms of technologies, of course, there are a lot of technologies. Nevertheless, as it was already mentioned here, we have a lot of water in Europe. So we are actually not used to create more efficient technologies. I mean, nowadays is in Europe, or especially in Germany, it's like we are going now towards completely sustainable energy. So it's like in 2 years in Germany, there will be no coal-fired power plants anymore, no nuclear power plants. There will be just green energy. In terms of this, you also need to take water energy into account, where things are going to be different. About technology, what I can say, what is very important also in terms of sanitation is that a lot of plants can purify water completely. Yeah. This is a big technology and big advantage we need to take care of, because also what we lack in Europe here is to think about all the smaller components which pollute our water, such as BPA, such as plastic particles, such as heavy metals, which are most often not filtered out completely, and plants can do this. And this we need to take into account. And just some numbers I looked at the moment. So it's like the agricultural sector is taking 70%, is consuming 70% of the global water consumption. The industry is consuming 20%, and the rest is on the private side, just 10%. So this was also my point at the beginning, where we need to start consuming less in the agricultural sector. And yeah, Donald, you're completely right that livestock, that feedstock is consuming most of the water because of crops they are consuming. Yeah, but this is where we have to narrow down. And also, Brian, I like your point in terms of consumption. Do we really need this variety of food? Do we really need this variety of products, or can we scale it down to a certain aspect? And then also our water consumption will be scaled down. And another figure which I looked up, the USA are the biggest consumer in terms of water consumption per capita. But if you look on a global scale, then it's Mauritania. And so, like the driest continents, the driest countries are actually using the most water as well. Mauritania is on top with 8,000 cubic meters, followed by Turkmenistan. And then you have USA is just on the 12th place in terms of this. So this was what I wanted to add. Of course, technology is a very, very big point, and also to think about desalination, which was already added here in this round. Israel is one of the forerunners in terms of desalination. I think I don't know how much fresh water they are now producing from desalinated seawater, but they are one of the very big forerunners. And I think this will also be one of the biggest technology gains we need to add. Because as it was mentioned, climate is shifting. Rainfalls are getting nowadays more severe. The soil can't take it up, so most of it is evaporated again. And in terms of this, of course, we need to take desalinated water into account. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you. Professor Paul.
Yes, living in Canada, I mean, Canada has such an abundance of fresh water. I mean, just look on the maps of Ontario or Quebec, and you just see lake after lake after lake. And a lot of them are oriented in a north-south direction, with some offset from and that's a remnant of glaciation where the glaciers advanced and retreated in a north-south direction, scraping away soils, which are now many lakes. So, as a result of this huge abundance of fresh water in Canada, Canadians are among the most wasteful of water on the planet. Highest per capita users. Right up there. Above just about every other country. So, so just move to Canada if you're facing water shortages. We're also we have the lowest population density just about in the world. There's lots of space. The government is very favorable towards immigration, which was, of course, greatly reduced in the last year or so because of the coronavirus. So, but there are a number of different companies in Canada. Even though we have a surplus of fresh water in general, there's a number of different companies looking at different technologies to advance them. I mean, one of them is if you apply high pressure, like little portable devices. So if you're out on a ship and you're in a life raft, you can actually use a hand pump device to extract fresh water from seawater. You have some sort of reverse osmosis or membrane, and you hand pump high pressure seawater, and then some of the salt gets trapped in the membrane, and the fresh water can come out the other side, things like that. So there's technologies like that. I mean, one of the things that I've always been fascinated in is how, of course, most plants are salt intolerant, but there are plants like there are trees. I mean, think of mangrove trees. They extract. They sit in salt water, in often very brackish water, and extract water, fresh water, to survive. There's some sort of, some sorts of grasses and things that are saltwater tolerant. If you're in marshes, that are a combination of fresh and salt water, they can survive in the salt environment. So I think we could do a lot more. We could do a lot of research on trying to understand, how these plants actually can survive in saltwater environments. Also, we can just look at seagrasses, and we can look at species that, kelp, for example, species like that, and try to use some of the knowledge from those species to make some of our crops that we grow in coastal regions salt tolerant, because often, when there's a massive storm and an inundation, like from a hurricane or something, the salt water destroys a lot of the most fertile soils, and crop growing regions are on coastal plains, not very high above sea level. So if we can somehow use DNA genetic technologies to modify some of these crops so that they are tolerant to saltwater intrusion, that would be a good thing for for feeding the planet. And so I want to thank everybody. I'm learning an awful lot in these sessions, and again, I think that food. We need to talk more about food in these sessions, because food is mostly comprised of the water, right? The human body is a huge percentage of the human body. What is it? 70 or 80% is water. And it's mostly the body. In the body's case, it's more like salt water. There's so much in common between blood and in our bodies and salt water. So, water is a key resource, of course. And one of the, as an aside, not really related, well, we're talking about water, but there's a lot more water on other planets and things than we ever thought. If you look, there's water on the moon in craters, in the dark craters in the form of ice. There's water just below the surface in Mars. Mars. We should keep Mars in mind, because it was a very watery planet in the past. Being a smaller planet with lower gravity, water eventually escaped out of the atmosphere and away from the planet. But it was teeming with rivers and lakes, etc., and probably life, which we haven't determined for sure yet. But we need to keep sort of those things in mind. How unique Earth is, because Earth is only one of it's a very rare place in that water can exist as both a solid, a liquid, and a gas. Right? There's a narrow temperature range in which that is possible, and we have it, and that's vital for all life on our planet. That actually is a physical principle that holds on our planet. So thank you everybody for all your great comments.
Thank you, Professor Adrian. You are expert from Asia Pacific. So yeah.
May I first, sorry, Sharif, because I have to leave very fast. Okay. My apologies, Adrian. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for the great discussion. It was really, really interesting. I also took some points with me. Well, Paul, what I have to say is, lucky us, we are a closed system on our planet. Also in terms of water, we have our problems here, and we should solve them first before we look on other planets. What I think about sanitation, it is a crime that people have no access to clean sanitation. And in these terms, it is also a responsibility of countries and of companies to do something in this regard, because access to clean sanitation or to build clean toilets doesn't cost a lot. And it really helps the country in a very, very much. And in this regard, I also want to add one thing which is coming up now in Germany. Is a law is called for supply chains, traceability of supply chains, to make them transparent in terms of child labor. So a company has to prove that my product from the beginning of the resource extracting is not being done by child labor. And in terms of this, you can also make the loop to sanitation so that you can force companies that you have to add a certain amount into a country to develop certain projects. And one of the biggest solutions towards, I think, clean water, drinking water, are trees. Yeah, and also mangroves, as you added, Paul, because trees, they not only purify the air, but they can also purify the water. And this is, I think, one of the biggest solutions which we have. They keep water in one place. They maintain a healthy soil, and they help us a lot also in terms of water and clean air. Thanks so much. I have to go now, unfortunately. I wish you a wonderful time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Professor Adrian.
Yes, I've lived in Japan and Malaysia, Singapore, Asia Pacific. So I think probably the Singapore, as I said, as I mentioned before, is very wealthy country, so they use very high technology to produce water, such as desalination, and they also recycle the wastewater, and so they're rich enough to use these very advanced technologies. Malaysia has a lot of water, which is very lucky. Has a lot of water, but I think there's a problem with the sanitation, and but it's not. I think Malaysia is a little bit better situation because it does actually have a lot of water. Just needs to improve the distribution of the water and the sanitation of the water. Japan, of course, is also a very wealthy country, so they have no issue with water. It's highly sanitary, and everyone has access to clean water. I think if you again look at Asia Pacific, is not a single entity. There's so much variation in terms of water sanitation and water distribution. So I guess this needs to be addressed because there's a lot of very wealthy countries in Asia Pacific, and there's a lot of poor countries who have very bad water situations. So we need to address this imbalance.
Thank you, Professor. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. Before I go for the concluding remarks, I just want to share World Talent Economy Forum. We are trying to create knowledgeable content with the help of speakers from 100 different countries, already 300 different speakers and different organizations from around the world, from Asia Pacific, from North America, from Europe, even Africa, many countries actually, contributors, organizations, government, policymakers, even UN representative and World Economic Forums, many important organizations also joining. And our major objective that we want to create a awareness and want to create a knowledge-based economy. So those who are observing our shows, I really request everyone share as much as possible in your classroom, in your corporate office, with the government officials. So hopefully you will learn a lot. And we have 240 contents right now. So hopefully it will be very, very helpful for different developing nations. And by this way, you can understand what's going on in the developed nations and the developing nations, and we can march together and we can solve many problems together, like this water problem or sanitation problems. So I directly want to go for the concluding remarks for today. I want to start from Madam Durga Das and her teams, then Dr. William, then Professor Donalds, then Paul, Professor Adrians, and finally Mr. Brian. Yes.
So, thank you, Sharif. As always, it's been an entertaining discussion. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to give my concluding remarks and followed by Kumar, but then I'll have to say goodbye at the end of it and not be able to listen to the rest, but I will watch the show to catch the concluding remarks of the others after this. So I have a few points that I wanted to share, and then I think Kumar had a couple of points as well. I'll keep that brief. The first thing is we talked about decentralized systems, and I completely agree with that. One of the ways of achieving that is through the solutions that we are actually making. And Donald, when you said we're looking at large-scale solutions, there are two parts to it, right? One is making everyone independent in their own home. And $1 billion will actually, there's 1.2 billion people who don't have access to clean drinking water today in the world. $1 billion will help reduce that percentage by 12% based on a business plan that I put together, making them completely independent of any other source of water other than what's available in the air and completely within their own home, right? And without touching groundwater, which means for every for 11% of 1.2 billion people, calculate simply 10%, you're talking about 120 million people getting 20 liters of water every day. And for every liter of water that we take from the air, we don't take 2 liters from the ground, which is what happens with RO systems or desal systems, which is 1 to every 3. The second point I wanted to bring up is, yes, Europe has water, Canada has water. I've lived in North America for 25 years myself. But a liter of water costs me, what, $2.50 or $3? In Europe, it costs me 2 or 3 euros for a bottle of water. And we can make water from air for 2 cents for the same liter of water. 2 cents and 3 euros or $3 is a huge difference. And to add to it, we're putting it in plastic bottles and adding to further environment damage. So if you can have a machine that makes water at 2 cents of mineralized water with a pH of 7.5 and catch it in a glass to drink rather than put it in a plastic bottle which we throw away, I think we'll all add a lot to keeping solving our environment crisis. The third point is, of course, on the large-scale systems, our solutions that we're talking about, and I'm not trying to hard sell my solutions here. I'm just trying to say the solution that we have and we're working on are to also give large-scale solutions to large residential complexes, which are not a one-off home, but that are 300 homes, 500 homes, a villa community. And those solutions are at less than, it's negligible. When I say 2 cents a liter of mineralized water, here you're talking about 1/10 the cost of that when we do the large-scale systems to our solutions. And those are what we do for communities and villages. And I think that is that is a price point. When I say 10 paisa is 1/70th of $1, right? And so we're talking about really, really low cost, affordable drinking water. So those are 3 points I wanted to bring up, in my concluding remarks. I think Kumar had a point.
Yeah. When we talk about cattle feeds, I think, in India, we are 80% of our people are eating vegetarian. We're not non-vegetarians. We don't eat meats here, but still we face water crisis. And another thing is infrastructure, which you said, as Durga mentioned, we are trying to address that point because we don't need a huge infrastructure to deliver water or distribute water. People who live in their own home, they can create their own water in their very own kitchen. So those two areas we wanted to address, and also doing sanitation in cattle fields as well as in poultry farming. We are currently working on poultry areas where chicken or the other cattle fields will suffer a lack of hygiene in the water. We are trying to address those issues, and we have in that. So, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Dr. William.
Well, once again, I've learned more than I've contributed. I feel like a thief intellectually. Bit of a joke. Listen, I think the import here for all of us is that for the audience, that all of these ideas, desalination, the re-examination of food production, the idea and the notion and concept of production line from beginning to end. All of that is important because when we start to go through the issue of water, one thing that I'm concerned about as we move forward, water is going to be what people are going to fight over. In the past, the world would fight over oil, or they'd fight over diamonds, or they'd fight over some other resource. But now it's becoming increasingly clear that nations and wars may be over water. So that we can avoid that now if we start to do some of the things that my colleagues here have suggested by focusing on things. And all ideas are on the table, every single one, because there's no one-shot solution. I'm particularly hearkening, Brian. I don't want to, preempt your portion, but I think, Brian, one of the points that you made, if I may crib, it's simply this: that one of the things that by focusing at home and making the idea of intelligent, thoughtful use of water, even at home, it has that, for lack of a better term, ripple effect in terms of how we think about what we purchase, what we do, what the corporations are doing. Because if we are conscientious at home, then we then start to look for other places where we get our stuff. So it may only be 10%, and I'm not even sure what that number is. But to the extent that we focus on home and we make it a priority in our own personal lives, then I'm confident, Brian, that you're right. It will ripple through the rest of the economy. And with that, I just want to say thank you. I'm always happy to be here.
Thank you, Dr. William. Professor Donald, can you unmute yourself?
I want to emphasize the damage that poor sanitation does to people and their lives. I was reading up on it, and in India, going to the bathroom outdoors is still very, very, very common, and so it does pollute the water system. So when you look at the thing of technology, what kind of technologies are we really talking about? I mean, composting toilets, pit latrines, various kinds of technologies that are extremely basic. I mean, but they are technology. I mean, the wheel is technology. But we're looking at almost everything we said, if we think about it, is more about human factors. In California, we have low flush toilets. We have shower heads that restrict the amount of water. And since 1992, or I just looked it up, or late 90s, actually, a little to now, we've reduced per capita water consumption by 50%. So we're using 2/3 as much water as we were 30 years ago. And yeah, that's cool. You can do it. And but I think that that's really the message, is to understand how damaging basically poor sanitation can be, and how kind of simple the technology is to be able to solve that problem. So I think that we need a lot of, and then also that it's like human factors, like people just don't realize, they just don't know. So education is part of the whole thing. So it's a combination of simple technology and education. We can go a long, long, long way in a very short amount of time. So thank you. I always love being on the show.
Thank you, Professor Paul.
Yes, thank you again, Sharif, for running these sessions and for inviting me to this session. I just want to hope that people remember that any new infrastructure being built for water, either for distribution of fresh water or for sanitation, keep in mind that the climate is rapidly changing. We're getting the extreme weather events. For example, if you build a new sanitation system, the engineers will come up with a diameter for the pipes at the various hierarchies of the system, like from the house to, the street to the city maybe. And the diameters of those pipes needs to be built with, the future in mind, future extremes of weather, rainfall, etc., and not present day numbers, because our climate is rapidly changing. So And also just to keep in mind that all the systems are tied together. So we can't really talk about, say, food supply or water availability, supply, sanitation, without considering the whole system, how the whole climate system is changing. So thank you to all the panelists. Very interesting discussions and learning more than I'm contributing, I think, as well.
Thank you, Professor Paul. Thank you, Professor Paul. Professor Adrian.
Hello. Yes, it was a very good discussion, and I think probably one of the main things is, as far as water is concerned, we have to really consider those unfortunate people who don't have access to clean water and toilets. I would say, as I said before, there's a big disparity, even in Asia Pacific, very rich countries like Singapore, Japan, Taiwan, etc., and very poor countries. So I think we need to somehow make the lives better of the people in the same region, Asia Pacific, who really don't have access to clean water. So for the more developed countries, I think we need to think about how we can redistribute water, maybe using dams from wet places to dry places, and also really to look at a lot of water is really being used for industrial purposes. So maybe that can be reduced as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brand.
Hi. Wow, this is a great discussion. I often feel very alone in the work I do. I live physically removed. I think my nearest neighbor is about 2 kilometers away. And so it's really just inspiring to hear that other people, many of them skilled in ways I'm not, are thinking about solutions at all kinds of scales. So even though I've got my preferred solutions I want to push on the world because I think they can save the world, I'm happy that anyone cares at all, that anyone's trying to think about this. Because I think we're usually, in terms of change as a society, we're emergency driven. Like, we're not going to change unless we have to. People are not going to stop consuming as much as they can because that's what we're developed to do as an organism. Like all organisms, we're going to use up all the resources we can. And so I wonder about cultural alternative paths to get us out of that kind of trap. Because I can't even, get my friends who I've talked to for 25 years about this stuff to not take so many showers. No one's built a composting toilet in my design. And I have to do better at communicating that, of course, and I need to publish more videos and publish better designs and talk about peripheral cases. But I'm concerned that essentially we have all these externalized consumption costs, like the costs of our consumption, that are hidden from us. So when you talk, for example, about sewage treatment, there's a whole plant out there. They have to dig up roads and repair pipes, and it's a totally unsanitary, extremely expensive solution, and it's actually illegal, probably where you are, to build a composting toilet. And I would challenge all of you to check out the laws on that. Can you build a composting toilet where you live, and why is the government not letting you do something that's an obvious solution that benefits everyone, especially in a place like India where open defecation is a problem? This is an easy solution. There should be no more discussion about it. We should stop shitting in clean water. That's it. And thank you all for a great conversation.
Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. Hopefully you will join more our World Talent Economy Forum's discussions. Your contribution is very, very important. The speakers actually help us a lot to understand different topics, and I'm sure many of the youth community, policymakers, corporations, they are also learning from our sessions. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. So I request all of our observer, those who are observing our session regularly and supporting World Talent Economy Forums, please share as much as possible. And thank you everyone. Thank you our honorable speakers for joining World Talent Economy Forum discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.